Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, brought to you by the Pigskin Podcast Network. You can find them at PigskinPodNet on Twitter, or you can search the hashtag TPPN. Matt is here with me. We are going to recap the doubleheader Monday night, which still feels weird saying that after week 2 games. We had 2 games on Monday night, and then we are going to preview the Thursday night football game between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns. Matt, what is going on this magnificent Wednesday?
Hey, we had a nice drop in temperature. It was almost 90 degrees yesterday. It's 65 today and a little bit of rain. Definitely feels like fall, which is good because I feel like I spend all of August just waiting on bated breath for the NFL, and we're 2 weeks in, and it feels like it's been 6 months.
You know what? It really has. That game last week, I should specify, the last minute and 44 of the game last week aged me like 10 years. I
like how Nick Chubb tried to take responsibility for losing his team
guy.
the game because he scored a touchdown to put a team up 13 points against a team that had no timeouts and less than 2 minutes left. I'm sorry, Nick. You're an ultimate team player. That ain't on you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, Sir Nicholas Chubb, if you ever listen to this, I want you to understand you are the best running back in the NFL by far. You're amazing to watch. You're a fan favorite. And the fans who said it was your fault are fucking stupid. Sorry for cussing. It is not your fault. It is 100% on Kevin Stefanski, Joe Woods, and that defense.
If it makes you feel better, when we got to Denver's recap on Monday, I let one fly too.
Did you? Yeah, listen, guys.
I mean, at least you didn't have your team having to have the hometown fans counting down the play clock, which was both endearing and terrifying.
Yeah. Look, dads out there, got a kid on the way. Do him a favor. Do not have to root for the Browns or the Broncos. Pick somebody better because it sucks. It's bad out in these streets.
You know why? You just Cowboys, because then they'll know consistently they will be let down every year.
No, I mean, you could pretty much say the same thing about the Browns, too. 30 years of it. 30 years of disappointment. I'm used to it by now. All right, anyways, let's talk about a team that was not disappointing and has not been so far this season. The Buffalo Bills, who beat the Tennessee Titans 41-7. Matt, is it time for Titan fans to panic? Because if they have not been listening to our show, I feel like we were telling them to panic early. Are they hitting the panic buttons now?
I mean, the week 1 loss to the Giants was not a great look. They were never really in this game. I know technically it was 7-7 at one point in time, but they were getting waxed up and down the field. They were getting dominated on defense. Ryan Tannehill looked real bad. They probably have some line issues. We had wondered, the Derrick Henry we saw at the end of last year, was that coming back off an injury or was that starting to be a worrying sign? He wasn't spectacular week 1. He was not very good against Buffalo. 13 carries, 25 yards. He falls into the end zone, so you get, those touchdown points, but he's never been a pass catcher. You need him to be pounding the rock. They put Malik Willis in. I know a lot of people are like, oh, the Willis era is beginning. No, they had given up on that game. I think the worrying signs have been there for a little bit about this defense. 2 years ago, that defense was abysmal and the offense was just good enough to carry them in. Last year, it felt like at times they made some progress, and people like to say Tennessee played to the level of their competition. So maybe you're going to lose that game against the Giants because they're playing down to the Giants. They did not play to the level of their competition. I don't know if they're capable of playing to the level of their competition right now. They don't look like they have a lot of dynamic pop with their weapons. They don't look like they have a great running game. Their defense is mostly a rumor. I mean, they let Saquon Barkley decimate them the week prior, and they just let Josh Allen and the passing game destroy them. So what do they do well? I mean, that's if I was a Titan fan, that's where I'd get to be worrying. And I was looking at their week 3 game. They're back home. They're facing the Raiders, and the Raiders may have catastrophically blown a game on Sunday, but their offense and their defense has looked much more in sync and cohesive at times. That is going to be a tale of 2 0-2 desperation teams. And if Tennessee can't win there, and I don't think they do, where do they go? And do we see more Malik Willis?
Yeah, so we'll play the Malik Willis game here in a minute. I want to stick with Derrick Henry because I faded him like every year, and he's proven me wrong. This year, we didn't necessarily have him high in our rankings, but I'm pretty sure we all had him in our top 12. We didn't have him below that, but we were not super high on him. Now, the Raiders, you mentioned good defense, but they gave up some yards to Chase Edmonds in week 1. Last week, they didn't give a whole lot up, but Connor got hurt, so I don't want to read too much into that. I think that's the game, though, that we've got to see something from Henry, because then they get the Colts, and granted, the Colts are 0-1-1, but for the most part have been very good against the run outside of James Robinson. The Commanders are decent against the run. Then they get the Colts again before the Texans, which he should be able to put up points, but then the Broncos, the Chiefs, the Packers, the Bengals, the Eagles. Like, it's getting late early for Derrick Henry. And the bad part about him is I think he's very much in that Zeke territory where at this point, you're really not going to be able to move him for anything. Like, he's one of those guys who's just going to have to ride it out on your roster. So I am very worried about Derrick Henry. On to the Malik Willis side of things. You just mentioned that we'll give their next couple games. Raiders, which I think they could lose. I think the Raiders are a better team. You mentioned it. Catastrophic failure in that game. They should have beat the Cardinals. So, I mean, if they lose that game, you're now 0-3. Colts, I think, are a better team, but they're not playing well this year.
That's going to be that could be 2 winless teams because the Colts have the Chiefs this week, and I think 0% chance. So I think it's 0-2-1 against 0-3.
So, I mean, you're looking at what? If they lose that game too, it's got to be by the Colts, by the Commanders, or the next Colts game that we see Malik Willis. And I don't think they're going to keep running Ryan Tannehill out there. And what was interesting too, I don't remember if you remember this. When we did the Titans preview, we had some fans in the chat talking about it because I brought up I thought Mike Vrabel could be fired.
I think so too.
He has the best odds to be the first coach fired, which I did not know that at the time. But we had people in the chat saying, nah, he just re-signed. He's not going anywhere. There's a realistic shot that by the end of this season, Vrabel, Derrick Henry, and Ryan Tannehill are all gone. And we're looking at a completely new Titans team next year.
Yeah, because, I think Vrabel, I'll be honest, the Colts-Titans matchups twice in the next 4 weeks is going to be fascinating. On Monday's show, I mentioned that I firmly believe Frank Reich needs to be on the hot seat because every year they've changed quarterbacks, seemingly blaming quarterbacks for their problems. And it's not only their problems. I think both the Colts and the Titans could be looking at a time where they're flipping over. And, what we've seen from Jacksonville, I was more skeptical than anyone. I think we're tracking toward a decent possibility that you have like an 8 or 9 win Jaguar team that is the playoff representative from the South.
Dude. That is crazy.
Well, I mean, I actually think the Texans might be better than either of these. Like if you're looking at the Titans, Raiders, Colts, Commanders, Colts, Texans, maybe they split with the Colts, but I'm not confident they win any of those. And then you're right. Chiefs, Broncos, Packers, Bengals, Eagles. And then you start getting into your Jaguars, Chargers, Texans, Cowboys, Jaguars. We we were criticized for being too low on the Titans when I had them at 7-10.
Yeah.
I might have been amazingly too bullish.
I think I only had him with 3 wins, and I thought I was going to be wrong.
It's been a shocking division all the way around. The Jaguars look much better than I expected. I think the Texans
look like the best team in the division, which is insane to say. Like, that defense has played good 2 weeks in a row. Like, granted, I don't think the Broncos have hit their stride yet, but they looked good against Denver. And then who did they play in week 1? Was it Denver?
No, they played the Colts.
And they looked good in that game too. Like, they blew that game. They should have won that game against the Colts. So, like, I feel like it's insane to say, but I'm like, man, they've looked good 2 weeks in a row.
Let's take a second here. If you're a Texans fan and you're watching this team, like, I think we thought all the way going into this year, you shouldn't be trying to. I know Atlanta, their coach is like, hey, we're trying to win games. Like, but are you and should you? Houston would have been another team I like that. I don't think they're trying to win. They want to get that quarterback. I sort of like Davis Mills, and I've seen your comments about the 2023 quarterback class.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of now going the other way. Like, should the Texans actually be trying to gun for like an 8 or 9 win season and potentially make the playoffs?
Why not? I mean, the Browns are going to get you a top 5 pick, so you're going to have one at least in there. So, I mean, we'll talk about them later, but that's just an embarrassment, and I think that's not going to go away. It's going to continue. So, I think you have to, though, because while I'm with you, like, I don't know that I think Davis Mills is the franchise quarterback, but he has not been horrible. That defense has been much better than I thought it was going to be. That team in general looks good. Why would you not go for it? Because there's no guarantee, even if you say you do fail, right? Say nobody's actually going to tank. The players don't want to tank. The coaching staff don't. Lovie Smith doesn't want to tank because he doesn't want to lose his job. But let's just say that they do lose, and you end up with like a top 3 pick. There's no guarantee that you even get CJ Stroud or Bryce Young. No guarantee that one of those players pans out to be a franchise-changing player. We've seen that with these first-round picks, so why not go for it? And what happens if you do make a deep run in the playoffs? I think it's crazy to say right now that the Texans could win a Super Bowl, but a lot of people said about those horrible Giants teams, and they ended up going on and they beat the best offense we've probably seen in the NFL that I can remember. And the undefeated I was going to call him the undefeated Tom Brady. He's the undefeated New England Patriots with Tom Brady and Randy Moss. So, like, crazier things have happened. But I do agree with you. Like, not even a month ago, 2 weeks ago, if the 3 of us, you, me, and Dennis, were sitting here and being like, the Jags or the Texans are going to win this division, we all would have put the money on neither. And I feel like a better shot one of those guys wins it than the Colts or the Titans, which all of us were out on the Titans. I think it's more, when we really look at that too, the Colts has just been shockingly bad. But I'm with you on Frank Reich. Don't want to get into a Colts conversation here, but I think there could be some major shakeups here in the AFC South. Moving on to a actually good team. Like, I still think, I know we talked a lot about it, the fact that Buffalo was not afraid to play their starters a lot during the preseason has really led to them just absolutely cooking right now. But it does seem like the run game is a little bit stale. What do you make of the Buffalo Bills running backs?
Yeah, and those who didn't watch the game, who just surf along box scores, are probably looking. James Cook, 11 carries, 53 yards. He's obviously everything we thought he was going to be and more. He's the guy. James Cook they gave him carries when the game was well out of hand, and even so, most of his damage came on that 33-yard run. So he basically had 10 carries for 20 yards. I, going in, thought it was going to be a big Devin Singletary game. You're talking about a defense that gave up 182 yards to Saquon Barkley the week before, and I know Saquon Barkley is Saquon Barkley, but Devin Singletary has been pretty good. Only 6 carries there. He got 2 passes, 3 targets, 2 yards, was not heavily involved. It seems like all of these weeks they're rotating all 3 of these backs, and as a pleasant surprise for fantasy owners, they rotated in Reggie Gilliam this week as well in a goal line situation where he caught the touchdown pass, the first touchdown pass. You know, Dennis and I were on the air, and he's like, Gilliam scored. And I was like, I think you just made that up unless you're looking for one of the Monty Python guys. But apparently a real player that is on their roster. So I I think if you're looking at the long-term health of Josh Allen, it's heartening that he didn't carry a whole bunch of times. They don't really seem to be any more invested in the running game than they were last year, possibly less invested in the running game. I think that means none of them are really a good play unless you're just throwing a YOLO flex play.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of the not necessarily running a lot, Josh Allen still put up a ton of fantasy points. Like, dude is just absolutely.
Well, we want him
slinging.
back there slinging the ball.
Oh yeah.
Case Keenum had more rushing attempts than Josh Allen.
Yeah, I much prefer it that way. Just for not just for his health, but like longevity too. Like, I'd love to be able to see Josh Allen playing for like another 10, 12, 15 years. I mean, it's going to be fun. I'm very excited to see what this team looks like. They get Miami this week, right? So that's going to be
the game of the week.
Fun game. Hopefully Gabriel Davis will be back. Not that they really missed him with the way that Stephon Diggs went nuclear, but I still think adding a guy like Gabe Davis to that offense just makes it even more explosive. Like I said, I'm with you. I haven't looked at any of the other games. I know what game's coming up tomorrow because I'm invested in that. Outside of that, I know Miami and Buffalo is playing is probably the game of the week. The other Monday Night Football game, which I got to ask, did you like the dual? I've heard a lot of people complaining about the game, both games being on at the same time. Do you have an issue with that?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I like the idea of doing a doubleheader. I liked the idea that I wasn't up till midnight. Although, if you would have tuned out at halftime of the Philly game, you literally would not have missed anything, except for a Kirk Cousins meltdown. It was a little weird. They were only an hour apart, and because of
Kirk Cousins melting down in primetime, no way.
Because of the weird flow in Buffalo and that injury, which by the way, I'm so happy. Dane Jackson, if you didn't see the reports, no neck, no spine injuries. They actually let him out of the hospital doing some further. If you watch that in real time, I thought we watched a man get murdered. That is the greatest. That is the greatest thing. But it was weird having them both. You'd have something up in the top corner. I feel like what they did too was to have a throwback to when Monday Night Football was on ABC, because I'm sure it was the same in your market. Most markets, ABC was actually the one that carried Vikings, Eagles, and ESPN carried the other one. I like the doubleheader. I actually kind of like the doubleheader on week 1. That's what we've been used to. It was weird to have it be week 2, and it was weird to have these confluence games, especially since the matchups ended up featuring some of the most interesting teams.
Yeah, see, I've heard a lot of people talking about that. I guess maybe it's because I'm so used to, if anybody follows me on Twitter, you've seen my setup for college games. I have 2 TVs up, and then I have like 4 games going on my computer. So like I'm constantly moving back and forth between games. Like it didn't bother me as much. Now I did not watch all of both games either. I was trying to find some relaxation time, but I did watch a little bit of both of them. But I'm with you. I like the double headers. I do kind of like it when they are separated out though. And I wish they would start Monday Night Football games earlier than they do to begin with, because I hate as well as you being up to like 11 o'clock at night. Because some of us, I know we're in the minority, some of us do have to get up at like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. It would be nice to be able to get at least 4 hours of sleep.
Some of us do have jobs, guys.
Yeah, unfortunately. But the Philadelphia Eagles do beat the Minnesota Vikings 24-7. It was a good defense for Minnesota 2 weeks in a row, but as you mentioned, the primetime Kirk Cousins came out and he struggled. Are we worried about that at all for him? I mean, Justin Jefferson kind of took a step back to earth. I mean, it's just kind of is what it is, right? We've seen this for Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, Kirk Cousins, this happens from Minnesota. I think it actually says more about that Philly defense. And to me, it actually says a little bit more about the Detroit Lions. I don't know about you, but the Lions and the Vikings, who play each other this week, both played the Eagles the first 2 weeks. And we saw Detroit and Goff struggle a little bit to figure out that Eagles defense in week 1, but they actually came roaring back and put up quite a few points and made that second half surge. Kirk and the Vikings couldn't figure it out. It was a weird game flow. Only 6 carries for Dalvin Cook, only gets 17 yards. Neither team scored in the second half. Cousins looked like he was trying to force the ball to Jefferson a lot, which I don't know. You and I both had some high hopes for KJ Osborne. He's basically not existed the first 2 weeks. Irv Smith got into it a little bit. Adam Thielen got 7 targets, caught 4 for 52. It was kind of a ho-hum game in that sense. They didn't get the running game going very, very good. Their defense picked it up quite a bit in the second half, but Kirk just doesn't look quite comfortable. And it was a real shift. And now, they come home against the Lions team that has put up, do quick math, 71 points in 2 games. Minnesota is a team that I think was trendy for us to think they were going to be in the playoffs. Maybe Mike Zimmer was the problem, but maybe he wasn't their only problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really bummed about KJ Osborne. On a couple of the redraft leagues, I made sure to grab him because I really thought he was going to be good. That has not worked out. But you mentioned Irv Smith. I mean, we weren't really sure what to do with him coming back from the injury. I mean, would have had a much better day for fantasy if he doesn't drop a 50-plus yard touchdown pass. Are we believing in Irv Smith now a little bit at tight end? We've been waiting for him to make that emergence.
I don't know if believing. So week 1, he had 2 targets and no receptions. Didn't seem like he was a factor in the offense at all. 8 targets. Is it because Kirk Cousins, every time he looked to the outside, got beaten down by Darius Slay? Maybe. He had 8 targets. He got 5 for 36 and a touchdown. That's good. But I'm at the point with some of these players, and Irv Smith is one of them, that consistency matters. And
would you be willing Right. Would you be willing to, I mean, waivers have already gone, obviously, most people, but if he's sitting on your waiver wire right now and you have someone, we'll use KJ Osborne, who's been really disappointing through 2 weeks. Would you, if you feel like you need a tight end, if you bet on a Kittle, if you bet on a David Njoku, who we thought was going to be good, who's done nothing through 2 weeks, would you be willing to drop a KJ Osborne to stash Irv Smith for another week or so to see if he breaks out, or just kind of letting it go?
If I had space, it's tough because in Dynasty, he's probably rostered everywhere. In redraft, I'm kind of with Dennis. I don't love stockpiling tight ends on the off chance one of them hits. If you're in like a 14 or 16 team league, maybe you're playing that rotating tight ends. If you're streaming tight ends, maybe you look based on the matchup. But I don't think tight ends have actually done spectacularly well against Detroit the last couple of weeks. We didn't see much from Logan Thomas. Dallas Goedert had a very quiet week 1. So I'm not sure it's a great matchup. Are they going to go back to we've seen kind of a wide receiver 1 dominate. And I feel like that's what the Vikings wanted to do. They just couldn't. Justin Jefferson couldn't best his coverage, or Kirk Cousins couldn't get Justin Jefferson the ball around that coverage because Jefferson still got 12 targets, only caught 6 for 48. A lot of the interceptions ended up going, right in that wheelhouse. And I think that's why he started putting it to Smith.
For the Eagles side here, I mean, Jalen Hurts looked good for that first half. I don't even think they needed to really try in the second half, which is probably why they didn't. A.J. Brown, a little bit of a down game. I think he is going to be perfectly fine. But, we talked about it. I had the Eagles winning the division. But let's go a little bit further than that. Are they Super Bowl contenders with Hurts at quarterback?
I think they are, given the NFC. We've seen, Tampa Bay has a very strong defense. The Rams obviously have some issues that they're working through. We've seen they had an ugly loss week 1, and while they won, they didn't look incredible, we'll say, in week 2. And aside from that, Dallas is dealing with injuries in their own division, so Philly seems pretty set there. In the North, I like what Detroit's doing, but who knows? Minnesota, we just talked about some of their issues. Green Bay still has some stuff coming up. So I think the NFC is a little more wide open. They built a good team on both sides of the ball. I think it was a fine game for Brown. He still led the team in targets, had 8, caught 5 for 69. They just didn't need him to get up. It was very encouraging probably to see Devonta Smith get involved. Got 7 targets, was able to snag them all. Got Goddard involved, 6 targets. So those 3 guys looked like they're kind of forming the nucleus. Still a good game for Miles Sanders. He got 17 carries, which was, leaps and bounds over the other running backs. He's now suffering the same issue that all guys do when they play with running quarterbacks. He got 3 receptions for 6 yards, but Jalen Hurts, 57 rush yards, and got the 2 rushing touchdowns. It's a little concerning to me. They took their foot. Seemed like they took their foot off the gas in the second half, putting up no points. It's going to be a very fascinating game for them. 2-0 Eagles head into Washington to play their old quarterback Carson Wentz. Wentz has been really hot. Washington has a very good passing group, much better group than we thought. Curtis Samuel looks like what I thought he could be when he came over. Jahan Dotson looks like a good fit. They're getting them involved. They're getting Terry involved. I'm guessing Carson Wentz is going to be motivated. We saw in week 1 that revenge narrative isn't always a guarantee of anything.
Yeah.
But Wentz is basically going up against the quarterback that they chose over him. So I think that's going to be a good test. But as long as Philly wins the games they should, I think they have a chance to win the 50-50 games. Like going into this game, I thought they'd win, but I thought it'd be more of a 50-50 game. I was impressed with the way they dispatched of the Vikings.
Yeah, man, they're a good team, and it makes me feel better. I'm saying for over a year now, I think Hurts is going to be their franchise quarterback. I don't see any way they move on from him now, unless he just completely tanks the second half of the season. Like, I get he's not ever going to be Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady passing the ball, but he's better than I think a lot of people give him credit for. And what he does with his legs is just it's interesting. He wins games. Like, that's what he's been doing since really outside of his rookie season where he played 3 games. He's been winning games for the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, let's talk about this wonderful Thursday night football game. The Steelers head to Cleveland, right? They're going to Cleveland. It's in the dog pound.
Yeah, no? The Steelers head to Cleveland.
Okay, I was going to say, it's not a catch-up field, or it's not catch-up field anymore. They changed their name, right?
No, and it's an unpronounceable field now, so we're not even going to try.
Okay, perfect. Some crappy place where they wave yellow towels. Now, so it is in Cleveland. Steelers have no new injuries. Watt obviously likely still out. While the fans are calling for Kenny Pickett, looks like Mitch Trubisky will still be starting this game. For the Browns, Harrison Bryant, Joe Bitonio, Jack Conklin, and Myles Garrett are all questionable, and Jadeveon Clowney has been ruled out. The Steelers' offense has struggled. Can they get it going Thursday against a good Browns defense?
Yeah, and that's the real question. I fully expect we're going to see Mitch today. It was interesting, though, fans calling for Kenny Pickett last week. The offense hasn't looked good. They won that game against Cincinnati because Cincinnati imploded and they got a lot of turnovers. It kind of went going. But Dennis and I talked about this a little bit on Monday. It's trendy to want to blame Mitch Trubisky, but if you're actually watching Pittsburgh play, the root cause of their problem has been the root cause of their problem for a couple of years, and that's that line. Because we know Najee Harris is a talent, and he can't find no space to run. I don't know that greatly improves. They would luck out if Myles Garrett is out, because then Clowney and Garrett are both out. But Cleveland has generally had a pretty decent rush defense. They did a pretty good job holding the Jets' rush offense in place in week 1. They really stifled Christian McCaffrey in week 1. He only had 10 carries for 33 yards, and we think he's a pretty special talent. So I think that's a real concern. And then that impacts the time that Mitch has. Cleveland has a decent pass rush. They're going to be on the road. What Tomlin called out is they don't have enough splash plays, and I think that's a combination of not having the line not gelling together as an offense, and that's not a lack of preseason snaps because nobody played more time in the preseason than the Steelers played their starters and going through. I think there's been some questions about their offensive coordinator and their offensive game plan. What you would have taken away from that Jets game is you need to be aggressive in going down the field with a plurality of wide receivers. And that's one thing you would say Pittsburgh has options. They have Deontay Johnson. I love what Pat Freiermuth is doing. They have Claypool. They have Pickens. I mean, somebody throw Pickens the ball. So I think we need to see the Steelers come out and commit to attacking more, because that whole we're going to run it first down, second down, and we're probably going to run it third down. That's not working.
Yeah, it worries me for Najee. He's not only dealing with the injury, but that offensive line, as you mentioned, has been horrible. And I don't think that's helping him at all. I'll be very curious to see what this wide receiver core can do against the Browns. I thought they had a decent secondary coming in. I felt like Denzel Ward played really good against the Jets, but the rest of the group struggled. It looked like a completely different team than the team that played Carolina, who I thought they actually did a really good job of locking down that team. It was not a high-scoring affair, but none of those wide receivers really went off. I thought Grant Delpit had at least one pick, I think, in that Panthers game. Like,
I mean, Joe Flacco is elite.
He is elite. Yeah, just that team just looked completely different. And no offense to the Jets' weapons, because I do love Garrett Wilson. Corey Davis has been in the league for a long time. Elijah Moore is very good. I don't think that right now I would take that group over what Pittsburgh has in Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, and even Chase Claypool, who can be a dynamic down the field threat. So will Mitch Trubisky be able to put the ball down the field will be the interesting thing. I actually think you can't sit Najee for the Steelers because chances are wherever you took him in a redraft league or a dynasty, you don't have better options. I would not expect a big game from him. He's not even getting the dump offs really, which was kind of really what elevated his value last year. I think it's more a Deontay, and as you mentioned, Freiermuth. I still think that's a weakness of the Browns' defense is that linebacking core, and I don't think they'll bring a safety up onto Freiermuth. I think he's going to be the one. He burned them twice last year, so we'll see if Joe Woods can change that at all. But I think Freiermuth is probably the guy who has a big game tomorrow night for the Steelers. And Deontay Johnson's still been good 2 weeks in a row. He's still been getting ball. I think it was week 1, made that amazing catch on the sideline that I did not think was a catch. And then they went back and replayed. I'm like, holy shit, he actually came down with that. Mr. Stonehands, from everybody, says he has all these issues with drops, made some pretty spectacular catches. So I think both those guys are in for a good game. Let's see if George Pickens or Chase Claypool can challenge this defense vertically and win the way a Garrett Wilson did or a Corey Davis. Well, Corey Davis, I think, was more of a broken coverage, but Garrett Wilson dominated this secondary. They just could not. And outside, if whoever was on Ward was on, typically was not doing much, but the other side was just giving up play after play after play. Be very curious to see if the Steelers are able to do that with Mitch Trubisky. What are we expecting from Jacoby Brissett here against a good Steelers defense? He didn't look great in week 1 against Carolina. Average defense at best. I don't think the Jets defense is much better than Carolina's. And now he's going up against what I would consider probably a top 12 at worst defense in the NFL.
Yeah, but they have allowed some decent passing. You know, for as much as Cleveland or as Cincinnati struggled, Joe Burrow was able to hit Jamar Chase and make some inroads against that secondary. And we saw last week, I wouldn't call the Patriots pass offense particularly up-tempo, but Nelson Aguilar did quite well. Jacoby Myers had a decent game. Mac Jones looked pretty solid. So Jacoby Brissett has been serviceable. I think a big question is, what are they going to get production in the run game? I was encouraged last week by what we saw with Amari Cooper's usage. And I think he is a dynamic player.
Did you hear about why he got the usage in week 2?
Because they remembered he was on the team?
No, well, kind of. So Jacoby Brissett was asked about that. I think it was Monday or Tuesday. And what he said in the interview was like, I didn't think he was open. And then I went back and watched the tape, and I was like, holy shit, this dude's open on every play. So I made sure to look for him on every play. So that's why they fed him the ball. That's why DPJ just completely disappeared.
But so that brings up, they'll probably rotate some coverage to Cooper, and that's good. I would still like them to get Njoku involved a little bit more. That would be nice. But I think there is an opportunity. Like I said, we've seen if the Steelers allow some deep balls behind them. That might be a place DPJ, Schwartz maybe. They don't have
definitely not Schwartz. Let's not go
an incredible set of. Well, I don't really think that's David Bell's game. And Harrison Bryant being injured is kind of a bummer because I've seen him make some good down the field.
As much as I want to say, may the Schwartz be with you, he's not doing anything. That's what I was going to ask you, is if you feel like they're going to cover up Amari Cooper, would you be willing to play DPJ in a flex spot this week?
So I'll tell you, I played DPJ in a deep league flex spot last week.
So did I.
And I was not robustly pleased. That's where I have my questions about Njoku, I guess, a little bit, because we've seen him in years past get some deep balls. Is there an opportunity in there? But I do think you maybe take a chance. It's just so hard. It's hard for me to imagine that the Browns pass offense is going to have more than one player have a good fantasy game. In week 1, it was DPJ. In week 2 was clearly Amari Cooper. It's probably still Amari Cooper.
Yeah, I'm with you. So you're starting Chubb, starting Amari Cooper. I would feel very hesitant to play DPJ, but if you really wanted to take a shot,
The one that's the toughest for me is Kareem Hunt, because he was all over the place in week 1. Dialed back that, I mean, I guess he still had 13 carries, which is not that many fewer than Chubb, but didn't get any of the touchdowns. And in the passing game, it feels like he was pretty big in week 1, but not in week 2. I don't know what to make of that.
I mean, Hunt for me is just like he's a perfect best ball guy because like week 1 he had that really good game because he gets the touchdowns.
2 touchdowns.
But last week, I mean, Chubb was just finding holes everywhere he ran. I mean, it's so much fun to watch him play. But it's his fault we lost the game, right? So, anyways, let's not go down that road again because that's stupid. I have to take the Browns. I can't. I picked them to be 2-1 at this point. I actually thought they'd lose to the Fighting Baker Mayfields in week 1 and beat the Jets. Turned out that they beat Baker, couldn't beat Joe Flacco. So must have been the hair game. Hair game's elite, so he's elite. I think just right now they are the better team. I think they are better than Pittsburgh. You've got to win this game. They still think they can be a playoff team. You've got to win as many games as you can, so it's not all on Deshaun Watson the minute he comes back. I'm going to take the Browns to barely beat the Steelers at home in Cleveland.
Dennis also took the Browns. He's with you. I'm taking the Steelers. I just don't think they lose back-to-back games, and there's something about Cleveland that I don't trust.
I've got 30 years of hurt, I was going to say hurt feelings, just disappointment and, not trusting. They're the reason I have abandonment and trust issues. They abandoned us and went to Baltimore, and they came back, and they've been horrible since.
Now, it scares me a little bit, too, like the questionable people, their starting guard and starting tackle. Those are –
well, they said everybody's going to play, so we'll see what happens. I saw today that they're all available, whatever that means.
If you were looking for a robust sign of confidence, that wouldn't be one that gave me a robust sign of confidence. Although their backups might still be better than the line that Pittsburgh is rolling out there.
That is very true. So that'll do it for us today. We will be back on Friday to recap this game between the Browns and the Steelers, and we will preview the entire Week 3 NFL slate. Everybody have yourselves a great day, and we will talk to you.